We are very trusting as men. And you may say to yourself, what do you mean? I'm not trusting. I don't trust anyone. Have you ever met guys like that? Guys who just don't trust anyone. They're always second guessing. They're always checking behind people. They're always doing stuff like that. But the reality is, all of us have a form of trust. So let me ask you, do you drive? Most of us drive, unless you live in a city with subways and buses and you do that instead. You have a level of trust when you drive. Heck, you have a level of trust when you ride in a subway or a bus. You're trusting the driver. You're trusting the subway. When you drive on the street, you're trusting the person not to come into your lane. You say, well, I'm a defensive driver. Yeah, but there's still a level of trust, or you'd never get out on the road. Do you eat out at a restaurant? You're trusting them to cook your food in a way that you don't get sick. Now, sometimes restaurants don't do a good job of that, but most of them do, really. In fact, it's rare when we hear of a restaurant not doing well. We hear about it on the news or something like that. Or do you grocery shop? You're trusting that these companies are putting the food together safely in a way that helps you. You say, well, I only eat organic. I only eat this, that, or the other. Yeah, but you're trusting that those people are telling you the truth. You're not growing your own food. You're not slaughtering your own animals. You're not doing those things to make sure it's yours. So there's a level of trust that I think all of us have. Life is full of trust. Now, trust is something that we all have, and it's something we're kind of born with naturally. You have a desire to trust people, but it's not like a supply or a battery. You know, it's not something that some people are born with more trust and some people are born with less trust. It's not like talent. You know, some people are born with specific talents. Now, they can work to make those talents better, but they have a lot of the basic talents. Like, I don't have a talent to sing. Other people have a talent to sing. It's just the way it is. But trust is not like that. Trust is not something that you have a finite position of when you're born. Trust is a muscle. And when we understand that quicker, when we understand that trust is a muscle, something that we can get better at, and that will really help us live a better life. So today we're going to be looking at building our trust muscle as men and what it does for us. So let's jump in.
Welcome to the Confident Man Podcast, empowering men with the confidence they need to live their adventure. Now, here is your host, David Maxwell.
Hey guys, welcome to the Confident Man Podcast. I'm so glad that you joined me this week, and I'm so glad that you have a desire to be a better man. To be a man who's growing and getting better. That's what listening to podcasts like this will do. And I appreciate you, one, listening to the podcast, sharing it with friends, but two, also the fact that you just want to be a better man. We need men like that all over the world. So just keep at it, keep growing, keep getting better. I think it's going to help change our world. Now, today we're talking about building our trust muscle. And trust is something that we all understand. And some of us may be better at it than others for different reasons, and we're going to talk about that. But I want to start by just talking about I recently had a breach of trust in my life, and it was the first time in this area. I use a program called Evernote, and Evernote's one of my favorite programs because everything is saved in the cloud. As soon as you type it, it's saved. You don't have to, press Command S every 2 seconds or anything like that. And when you work on it on one place, it automatically changes it all the others. So if I make a change on my phone, it'll change it on the desktop version, my iPad version. So I use Evernote for tons of stuff. And I've probably used it 8-9 years. I've never had an issue with it. But recently, for the very first time, I was doing some work on my Evernote. And I don't know how, I don't know what happened with it, if it synced up with something else wrong, but I had just typed a bunch of things and it synced and did something and it was gone. It was the first time I'd ever lost something in Evernote. And I mean, I panicked. I wasn't sure what to do. I was like, are you serious? Because a lot of times when you create something, you're kind of creating as you're typing. So it's hard to remember it because you're kind of in a flow. So I had to go back and kind of try to recreate what I had typed out. And it was very difficult. And I mean, I was hurting on the inside. And for the next couple of days, I was checking, okay, did it save it right? Is something wrong? Was this a glitch in the matrix? And so it was kind of crazy. So, but that's really not that important. I mean, Evernote is just a program but it kind of represents something that can happen to us in life. In life, we can get hurt and we can have our trust broken. And maybe you've had that happen to you. When you get your trust broken, it's not only hurtful, but it's confusing and it's kind of disorienting in your life. You're not sure what to do sometimes. You think, what did I do wrong? What happened? And some men, when they get their trust broken, they never recover. They live the rest of their life not trusting anybody. But trust is something that we all have and something that we're designed to live with, designed to have in our lives. Life is better when we enjoy it and we can trust people. When you can't trust, you live with extra stress, you live with extra fear, you're worrying, you're not sure what's going to happen. And trust is something that when you have it, it kind of brings peace. But the great thing about trust is that trust is a muscle. Trust is something that you can build up. Even if you've been hurt, you can make that muscle stronger. You're not stuck with a specific amount of trust that once it's gone, it's gone. You know, once you lose my trust, you never get it back or whatever people say. That's not really true. Trust is something that you can grow. And I use the term trust muscle. I got that term from a recent book I read. It's a book by Henry Cloud called Trust. And it's an amazing book, and I'm going to use some different aspects of it in this podcast because it's such a good book. In fact, I recommend every man read it so you can be stronger with your trust. I'll put a link in the description of the show, and you can go to it and get it and just read it, and I think it's going to help you get better as a man. So what we want to do today is talk about some things we can do to build up our trust muscle to get better at it. And we're going to focus on the trust muscle reality, the trust muscle rehab, and the trust muscle growth plan. The first thing we want to talk about is the trust muscle reality. The reality is we all have a trust muscle. We all do. If you have a weak trust muscle or a strong trust muscle, it usually comes from things that happen to you. And a lot of people had their trust muscles damaged when they were young. And I know what you're saying. You're saying, oh, David, does everything go back to my childhood? Isn't that just an excuse to not take responsibility for yourself? You just got to man up. Well, there is some truth that we do have to take responsibility. But part of that responsibility is looking at the reality of our life. It's not an excuse, but a reality if you were young and things hurt you badly, to the point where your trust muscle was severely underdeveloped. Maybe you were betrayed by a friend. If your trust was damaged as a child, it's something that you're going to have to do something about. You're going to have to fix it. I'm not saying you use it as an excuse, but the reality is it's something that can hurt you as an adult. Just like a lot of us get injured when we were young. Like I remember when I was a young teenager, I was playing street basketball. And one time I went up for a shot and came down and landed on my ankle and rolled it. And it really hurt. And next few days, I could barely walk. I was having a tough time with it. And this was back in the time, you know, you didn't go to rehab or anything. You just dealt with it. We didn't ice it. We didn't do anything. I didn't even know what we were supposed to do. And eventually I was able to use it. But it's been weak ever since. It's been something I've had to deal with. For a while, it was very hard. And then now it's not really so bad, but every once in a while I'll feel it tweak or do something. And it goes back to something that happened when I was probably 12, 13. And it happens that way with trust. I think we get it when it comes to our muscles, our bodies, but trust is the same way. If you have your trust hurt or broken, it's something that can cause damage as you grow up in your life, as you live. And we don't have to live with that hurt trust in our life. That's a reality. Now, some people grew up with strong trust. They grew up in a home where there was a loving, caring relationships. They trusted their parents. They trusted their siblings. And a lot of those things happen in a positive way. So they bring that into their relationships. They bring that. So it's the same thing. They bring that strength. So how do we know which one we are? Well, it starts with us just asking some questions. Like one question you want to ask yourself is, how trusting am I? And you're going to have to be kind of honest with yourself. In fact, brutally honest. Some people don't trust anyone but themselves. They really don't. They may say they do, they act like they do, but they don't trust anyone else. They only trust themselves. And then sometimes some people don't even trust themselves. And that's not necessarily a bad thing in that if you know that, okay, in this area, I'm not good. Like for me, caramel M&Ms, I don't trust myself with them. I don't buy them. I don't keep them in the house because I will consume all of them. It's just one of those realities. We all have those areas we know we can't trust ourselves in. But some people live their whole lives not trusting anyone. Are you that type of person? Are you a person who trusts kind of, or you always verify, you never really give yourself over to trust? Well, that's a sign that you've got some trust issues. And you say, well, Dave, what is trust? How do I know? Henry Cloud says that people must feel known in order to trust. In other words, people really have to know you, and you really have to know them to build a trusting relationship. And some of us don't do that. We don't take the time to get to know people. So when we say, oh, I'm a trusting person, but we don't have any close relationships, we stay very surfacey with everybody, you really don't trust. You really do have some trust issues. And today with our social media world, that just kind of exacerbates it because a lot of people have a lot of relationships, but none of them are deep and none of them are trusting. Another question, how trustworthy am I? Do people really know you? Or do you keep a shield up all the time? Are you a person who wears a mask all the time? The reality is, if you don't let people get to know the real you, you're creating a barrier of trust. You say, well, Dave, I've been hurt. Well, it's probably true. A lot of us have. And we were created to trust and have a trusting relationship. But when we get hurt, a lot of times we pull back. But what's happening is we're missing a really big part of our life. We're missing a big key to what makes life enjoyable, what makes it something we want to live, and something we have deep connections with. The truth is, every one of us wants to be known and to be understood. But when we carry this hurt, we live with an overdeveloped sense of protection. And a lot of times we keep our real selves hidden. We kind of avoid relationships when they start to go deep, when they start to get really close. And that's why so many men today struggle with loneliness. They don't have any deep friendships. They don't have anyone they're close to. They're wearing their mask all the time. They're really good at projecting an image. Everybody thinks they're one way or thinks another of them, but a lot of times they don't have trust. They're lonely and they're not sure what they can do about it. They think this is just the way I am. This is the way I have to live. You don't want to be like that. Another question is, what are my trust patterns? So what's your track record when it comes to trust and trusting relationships? You got to get honest about your friendships and your part in them. Are you a good friend? Are you someone people can call and count on? Or do people just kind of not call you? They don't really trust you. And you're like, I'm okay with that. I'm a loner. I like being alone. Do you really? You may be an introvert in some ways, but everybody wants to have at least one person that they're close to. A lot of men, what they do is they'll start a relationship, especially with women. And then if it starts to get too close, too intimate, they back off. The guys, they go from relationship to relationship with none of them lasting that long. A lot of times it's trust issues. Or you may be a guy who only seeks friends when you need something from them. And you may have people do that to you. A lot of relationships break down when it comes to real intimacy. I'm not saying every breakdown of trust is our fault. But we do have to look at our part in the relationship. Maybe there's something about us that draws people that we can't trust. Maybe we're attracted to toxic people. Some men are. The guys, they're always attracted to these women who just abuse them, women who take advantage of them. And you're like, dude, come on, pick better. Well, there's a problem with him. And a lot of times it's a trust issue. A lot of men have kept their mask on for so long, they don't know how to have an intimate relationship. They don't know how to be close to anyone, a woman, a man, their children, because all they've done is wear a mask their whole life. So that's something they have to look at your pattern. You have a pattern. I have a pattern. Every man has a pattern of trust. And they need to look at what's our pattern? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it a mix? Have we gotten better? Those are the things you want to look at. These are trust muscle realities. And we want to look at the reality of it. Because when we recognize our trust muscle, where it is and how it functions in our life, then we have the ability to make it stronger. The second thing in building up our trust muscle is having trust muscle rehab. Now, what does that mean? Well, we all know about rehabilitation. In sports, when an athlete is injured, maybe they have an ACL tear, something happens. Well, they take an operation, they get it fixed, but then they have to rehabilitate. They have to take that muscle and build it up. And that's really the long part. That's the hard part. If you have an ACL tear, they can fix the ACL, but then you've got to take the rehab. You've got to do the work to build the muscles around it, to do the thing so it doesn't happen again. And that's what a lot of guys need to do with their trust. There's a reality of their trust. Maybe it's been broken. Maybe it's weak. They have to do the things they need to do to grow it, to make it better. Maybe your trust has just been broken. Maybe people have hurt you. And so you just kind of back off. Well, you need to find those things to do to grow your trust, to get your trust better. Building your trust muscle up doesn't happen easily. It's not going to happen overnight, but it can be done. Recently, I've been doing some different weightlifting and trying to get stronger in different areas. And one of the things I realized over the last couple of years is how weak my glutes are. I didn't think much about my glutes like most men. I would do squats and other stuff. And then I watched some videos where they talked about weakness in a man's glute. I was feeling some pain on the left side of my knee when I would do my triathlons. And I wondered what was going on. And so doing some research, it said weak glutes. And I was like, well, what's the problem? I do squats. I'm okay. No, my glutes were very weak. I did a glute exercise and my butt burned for days. And then I realized I've got like baby glutes. I've got to do something about it. So I've been consistently trying to build them up. And you know what? It's hard. It takes a lot of work. I didn't realize how weak they were. And I think a lot of us as men have trust issues in our life, and we don't even realize how much we need trust rehab, how much we need to build those muscles up in our life. And what we want to do is look at some of the keys that can help us begin that process of rehabbing our trust. And one of the first keys we want to talk about is that trust is built by changing our focus. You've got to change your focus. If you really want to be a person of trust, you trust others, they trust you, you've got to change your focus off of yourself. Now, do we look at ourselves to get better and do things? Yes, we do. But our overall focus in life needs to be outside of others. You see, if you're always looking in the mirror, you're never going to see other people. And if we don't recognize that a lot of our trust issues come from an overdeveloped sense of self, that's the problem. We want to change our focus to where we really try to build up others. That makes you more trusting to them, and it helps you be someone other people can trust in because they know you're thinking of them and not just thinking of yourself. And that's what you do. Trust is built when we recognize people for who they are, not what they can do for us. And a lot of times we're guilty of looking at people as only a means to an end. What can you do for me? How can you help me? And we have to understand people if we're going to build trusting relationships. What are their desires? What do they need? What do they fear? What do they want out of life? Now, men have all of these characteristics, but a lot of times as men, we act like we don't. I don't fear anything. I just do whatever. I'm not afraid of life. I don't have a need. I can take care of myself. It's just not true. Men are very emotional. And that's why as men, if we don't build strong, trusting muscles, we're not going to have a great life. We're just not. You may have success in that you may make money and do things like that, what other people call success, but you're not going to have a great life. Your life's going to kind of suck because you can't build close relationships with anybody. You can't recognize your own feelings, and you don't recognize the feelings of others. We have to change our focus as men if we want to rehab our trust. And we've got to understand that trust comes from deep relationships. That's another key to understanding trust and to kind of rehabbing your trust. You've got to dig in and have deep relationships if you want to build trust. If you want to have trust, you've got to do the work of getting close to somebody. And you say, what do you mean? Do I sit around in a circle and cry or something like that? No, but a lot of times when you experience life with people, you build trusting relationships. Like the Navy SEALs. The Navy SEALs are a brotherhood, and you talk to them, they talk about it being a brotherhood. Why is that? Well, they all went through hell together. They did. You listen to what their training involves, you understand that that breaks you down. All those men have been broken down and they've been built back up and they went through it all together. So what happened? They built deep, trusting relationships because they know my brother will have my back because my brother made it through everything that I went through too. And that brings a depth of relationship that brings those very strong trust bonds. I'm not saying you have to go to Coronado and do Navy SEAL training to understand what trust is. You can have deep relationships with brothers and not get shot at and carry a boat down the beach or anything like that. But when you experience life with other men, you build those deep relationships, and you should want deep relationships with other men. You should desire that because men need each other, but it doesn't happen by accident. It's got to be intentional. You have to quit allowing the busyness of life to take you away from forming strong male bonds. You see, that hurts men. And a lot of men today are getting hurt because they don't have close friends. A lot of people move around the country, so they never experience those relationships with other men. It's only going to happen if you do it on purpose. It's not going to happen by accident. You have to want to build those relationships, and deep relationships help build stronger trust. The other key is to understand that trust demands empathy. If you want to build trust with people, you should really seek to understand them. Understanding is empathy. It's the ability to know someone, not have an agenda, not try to get them to do something for you, but just to know them for them. And that's a struggle for men because we live in a performance-based world. We just do. We're used to people demanding of us having to perform, and that's part of our role as men, but that's not how every aspect of life should be lived. If you are always based on performance, you never think about empathy. If you never think of empathy, you're not going to have deep relationships. Performance is important. It's a part of life, but empathy is where strong relationships are born. And if you don't have strong relationships, maybe the problem is a lack of empathy on your part. Maybe you don't really seek to understand others. Henry Cloud puts it this way: empathy comes from putting ourselves in someone else's situation and identifying with their experience. It doesn't mean you approve or disapprove of what they do, but you identify with their experience. That's what empathy is. Some men are afraid of empathy because they think it brings lower expectations or it's going to make them weak. It's actually the opposite. When you connect through empathy with other people, you're going to build stronger connections. You're going to build stronger loyalty. What is it that makes great leaders? A lot of times it's those leaders have the ability to understand their followers, to be empathetic toward them, not feel sorry for them, but to understand them fully. And when you have that, you can call people to a higher level of performance. They'll actually perform better for you because they trust you. You've built that trust. They will know that you have their best interest in mind because you really do, because you empathize with them and they sense that, they see that. So it's going to be a stronger relationship. They won't hold back because they know that you don't have a hidden agenda, that you empathize with them, that you really know them, and it's going to make things stronger. So one of the things we need to do as men is work to rehab our trust muscle, to build it up in those areas that we may be a little weak in. And when you do that, you're going to be amazed at how much better you experience life as a man. Okay, the third thing we want to talk about is the trust muscle growth plan. Now, if you want to grow your muscles, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen by taking a pill. Or you just saying, grow muscle. Building muscle takes something that's hard to do, and that's work. You have to lift weights. You have to do strength training. You have to eat right. You may have to supplement, take extra protein, do things like that. If you want to build muscle, you have to be intentional. It doesn't happen just because you want it. It happens because you put in the work and grow it. Trust is the same way. If you want to grow your trust, you've got to put in the work. You've got to do something about it and not just sit back. And you have to be intentional about growing your trust muscle. So what are some intentional things you can do? You've got to understand the risk. You've got to know that there is risk involved when you want to grow your trust. When you have trust with someone else, they can hurt you because you're vulnerable. And we got to recognize there is a level of risk, but that risk is necessary to build trust. The reason so many men don't trust is they've been hurt. Somebody hurt them. And it may have been when they were 13 years old and, the girl broke up with them in front of everybody. It could be when they were 40 years old and their wife left them. It could be any number of reasons. A lot of men get hurt and they say, I'm never going to get hurt again, which is understandable. Nobody wants to be hurt, but you can't avoid risk if you really want to trust. If men never trust, they'll never have deep relationships. Every relationship involves vulnerability. It's risky. Some guys don't like it. They want to stay in control. I know exactly what's going on. I'm in control of this relationship. That's not a real relationship. They're not close to the person. That's why you see so many men have the, 1 to 2 year average relationship with women. They'll get close to them. It starts to look like it's going to get serious. And when it does, those men back off. Why? Because in order to take the relationship to the next level, they've got to trust. They've got to trust the women. They've got to expose themselves, make themselves vulnerable. And that involves risk. And a lot of men don't like risk. And so a lot of guys just live with that loneliness. It's a loneliness that eats away at them. And they feel like it's worth it because they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to have risk. But the problem is they just get lonelier and lonelier, and then they start blaming others, when really it comes back to them and what they're doing with the risk factor. Another thing you want to do to grow your risk is look at your own reflection. We have to look at our reflections. Trust starts with us. You say, well, I was hurt by other people. That's true. But our ability to trust, and whether we have strong trust muscles or not, comes down to us and what we're going to do. Now, I'm not saying that's a self-blame. It's not where you sit around and go, oh, I can't do anything right. I'm such an idiot. I'll be forever alone. Nobody likes me. Some guys get like that and they blame the world. But what we want to do is openly and honestly look in a mirror and say, okay, do I have trust issues that are hurting my relationship? You've got to look at your own reflection. Maybe you have problems with women. Maybe you can't get a serious relationship, or they sputter out after a while. Maybe you have friendships that come and go. You don't really have anything deep. Maybe you have business partners that won't stay around with you, or subordinates at work who never want to work with you. You have to be honest about that. Now, understand that when you look in the reflection, it's not about judgment. It's not about saying, oh, I'm wrong, I'm terrible. It's just reality. We want to look at the reality of our life as men. We want to look at the reality of what's happening with our trust. And when we do that, we see what we can do about it. It's just like if you look in a mirror one day, let's say you're wearing a shirt and you look in the mirror and you see a stain on the shirt. And maybe it's a stain you didn't know was there. You can't see it when you look down, but there it is. There's a stain on your shirt. You've got to do something about it. You can either fix it or you can change shirts. But if you just ignore it, it's not going to go away. It's not going to disappear. If we don't recognize things, we can't fix them. If you never take the time to look at the reality of your trust issues, you'll never be able to grow your trust because you won't even know where to start. Just like if you're lifting weights and you say, okay, I want to fix my pecs. I want to make my chest stronger looking. Well, in order to do that, you have to see, what does it look like now? What can I do to make it better? What about my shoulders? What about my arms? How are they reflecting? And those are things you do to build your muscles. It's the same thing with trust. If you want to build your trust, you've got to know where to start. And that's really with your reflection. The other thing to do, if you want to grow your trust, is deal with the garbage. And I know you're saying, David, do you mean going back to my childhood again, like you said earlier? Yes, I am. It's just the truth. A lot of us carry bags into our relationships. We're carrying suitcases of trust issues that we need to get rid of. And if you don't get rid of it, it's not going to go away by itself. Now, Henry Cloud puts it this way, and I thought this was really good. He said the reality is that we don't have to go back into the past. We continually bring the past into today. Your trust issues aren't way back there. You're carrying them with you today. Now, you may have to go back to recognize where they came from, but you're still holding them today. That's the reality. And the reason we fix them is because they are hurting us today. I'm not saying we get out of responsibility. I'm not saying you blame the past so you don't take responsibility for who you are. But the way you take responsibility is saying, I'm going to fix it. Just like if you look up in your ceiling one day and you see a water stain, that means you have a leak. Well, you can do one of two things. You can fix the leak and then fix the water stain, or some people just fix the stain. Okay, I'm going to paint over it and no one will see it. Well, what's going to happen? It's going to come back. Why? Because you've still got the water leak. And a lot of men, that's what they do. They kind of gloss over problems in their life and they never go back and fix the real problem. They fix the garbage that's hurting them. And as a man, you've got to fix your garbage. You've got to fix the stuff that's hurting you. And how you grew up is a reality. Who hurt you, what happened, whether you have strong or weak trust muscles is a reality. I'm not saying you're seeking to blame everyone or do anything like that, but you have to take responsibility for yourself. And that means you may have to deal with that garbage. You may need some help doing it. You may need some people in your life, almost like when you want to lift weights, you get a physical trainer. You may need an emotional trainer, someone to help you work through those things. That's okay, because you're getting stronger and you're going to be a better man for it. Trust is something we can grow, but the key for you is to create an environment you can grow in, to deal with your stuff, to fix the issues. And when you do that, you're going to find your life is much more enjoyable. You're going to find your relationships are a lot deeper, and you'll be a much, much better man. Closing out the show today, let's review some truths about our trust muscles. We all have a trust muscle, just like we all have muscles. You have to have your muscles to live. They're necessary for life. But the only person who can grow their own muscles is them. No one else can do it for you. Even if you have a trainer, you've still got to do the work. The only way you can grow your trust muscles is to grow them yourself. You've got to work them to get stronger. You've got to say, I'm going to trust more. I'm going to build deeper relationships. And it's just like working your body's muscles. You have to have the desire and you've got to put in the work. If you don't have the desire to go to the gym or to have weights in your home or to do body weight workout, it's not going to work. But then you've got to do the work. The same is true with trust muscles. You've got to cultivate a desire to say, I want to have more trusting relationships. I want to be stronger when it comes to trust. I want people to be able to trust me more, and I want to be able to trust others more. I want to have deep relationships. And then you have to do the work. You have to do the work to intentionally build up that ability in you to have those relationships. You can wish them all you want, but if you don't do the work, it's not going to happen. But if you do the work, think about it, gentlemen. If you do the work, your life will be significantly better. Your life will have much more meaning. You'll have much better relationships, and you won't deal with that gnawing loneliness that so many men deal with today. Plus, when you bring trust into your life, when you make your trust muscle stronger, you're going to have not only a more meaningful life, but you're going to have a more impactful life as a man.
You've been listening to the Confident Man Podcast. Click subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can connect with David on Facebook and Instagram at David the Maxwell. Find resources to help you as a man at theconfidentman.me. That's theconfidentman.me.